Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
That was quite fun. My name is Jupiter. I'm not Jonas. I am a new featured host, and today we've got Toby with us, who's the community lead at Square Enix Entertainment, has been in the games industry for 12 years, so has a lot of general knowledge to share, especially in the community management field.
Yes, hi everyone. 12 years, part of the furniture at this point. Hopefully, some of that experience is relevant to 2024 rather than 2012. But let's see, and if if there's anything that catches people out and is interesting to them, hopefully they'll have learned something.
Well, community management in more like recent years has become even more important when it comes to building your player base up and everything. So I'm sure it has been even more relevant than previously. Yeah. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very well, very well. It is lovely and sunny here, where I'm based in Kent. It's actually one of those days where I actually had lunch outside today. Very unusual.
In
So very
England,
good.
in England, the
Exactly.
weather can turn at any point, and it's been like 3 days in a row. So practically done with summer now, right?
Precisely. We're done. Pack it up, go home.
As always, these talks are informed by entry-level skill hubs. So if you're looking for more information on entry-level jobs in the games industry, do check out the skill hub. There's tons of really useful information that have been like collected there that can really give you a sense of what to look for in these jobs, where you could fit in into different roles in the games industry, and lots of that sort of information. And if you're looking for people to talk to instead of just things to read, you can also join the Discord. It's a really happy and fun community that exists there from people in all different parts of their game development journey, their game dev journey, and their different skills and games journey. And so if you're looking for people to talk to and support there, there's plenty of people to make friends with. Yeah. Let's get into today's talk. We're going to be talking about feedback collection, surveying methods, and effective player support strategies, which is a very, very big title, but is a really important part of sort of using players' feedback and what they feel about games in order to better focus a game for your community. And it's something that we do a lot in community management at the studio that I work at. And it's just kind of a crucial point of sort of understanding what your player base is looking for, understanding what they're doing, and what they're struggling with and what they need from you as a community manager. So, Toby, do you want to take it away and define what a community manager is?
Yeah, thank you for setting me up so nicely. Yeah, when I got this this talk, the offer to chat about this, I had started to think a bit, and for me, whenever talk about community management is raised, for me, it always has to begin with what's the definition of a community manager? Because I think a lot of people have different definitions and understandings of what a community manager does. My personal definition of the discipline of community management is I essentially make people feel good about spending their resources, time, energy, money on the product or the game that I am community managing. So if they feel happy to do that, if they feel happy to get invested in that, then I've done my job. Now that's the overall definition. Now there's different roles within community management, I would say, and quite often some studios will have these roles in a single person. Some split them out. Some say they're one thing but are actually another. So I'm going to run just through a few of those. The first thing that a lot of people think about when it comes to community management is actually social media manager. So there's a social media manager and there's a community manager, and those are two different things. It's always a question I ask as well, just to sort of understand, check, how much do people understand about community management? This is the key question I ask. What's the difference between social media and community management? The way I define it, other people may have different definitions, of course. I'm not saying I am the full authority here, but my personal one is that a social media manager takes care of the people following the social channels for your game. So they're taking care of the Twitter, the Facebook, the Facebook, the Book of Faces, perhaps a Discord, but generally they're on what we call traditional social media. You post something, people comment, there you go. A community manager takes care of the people who play your game, regardless of whether they are actually following or engaging with your game at all. So a community manager will generally be more active on Reddit or Discord and the like, but actually what they have to think about is, okay, I'm managing the community, but I also have to make decisions or make recommendations to the developers that are good, not just for these people in this subreddit or in this Discord, but for the entire player base. And I think that that's something that a lot of people tend to forget, is how much the silent majority of the internet exists. You're never talking to the person in front of you. You're never talking to that one person who posted this question or this hot take, this takedown. You are speaking to the 10,000 people watching that exchange between you and them. And as long as you always bear that in mind, I think you can make better decisions. And then, of course, there's differences between a studio community manager, where you are with the developers and actively working to feed back on, how does the game itself improve, and then you have pure marketing community managers who are actually more there for making sure that the marketing and the hype is built, and those tend to be on publisher companies. But they are just as much community managers as the others. It's just that what they do to accomplish the role is slightly different, perhaps.
And the way that you define community feels very important as well, because we always find that the loudest people will seek out your Twitter and be mad there about whatever. But a lot of times we found in our own games that's not representative of the actual people that play the game. It's just the loudest voice. So it's a very, very good point.
Yes, exactly. And it's quite interesting. We were just discussing this in my team actually today, how a few years ago we had a game where there was an issue and the community was raising its voice about it. So we worked hard. We invested a lot of resources to fix that problem. And yet the people, most of the people who were loud about that didn't actually come back and say thank you. They didn't change their reviews about the thing. It just sort of was like, we fixed it. Okay, now what? And it barely impacted how the game was selling. So we actually did a ton of work for the benefit of perhaps the loud minority, in a way, which is not to say you shouldn't do that. It's just it's figuring out how big that group actually is.
So what can a community manager do that a regular developer or a marketer can't tend to do?
Yeah, that's another really big topic. I think thankfully we're past the point now where developers say, "Oh no, I'll just jump onto Twitter or Reddit and I'll see what the community says and I'll be able to make a decision or a judgment based on that." I think community is much more mature these days, thankfully. And that means that the role and the skills that the job entails are also a lot more defined and separate from, let's say, your regular developer and your marketer. So a regular developer, they might be coding on the game, they might be doing some art, but they are usually very focused on their one discipline. The community manager needs to understand all the disciplines and how the community as a whole feels about the entire project. And on top of that, a community manager will, just by nature of the experience of interacting with people constantly, have learned, developed skills, gotten better at knowing what to say and what not to. Whereas developers tend to need a social media policy given to them before they interact, and then they'll ignore it anyway. And then before you know it, there's someone sort of has screenshotted something that a developer said, and there's a fire for you to put out as well now. And on the other hand, you've got marketers, which again more traditionally on the publisher side, but a marketer will just come up with the assets, put them to agencies or boost them as advertising without understanding of actually how is the community, how's the audience reacting to that stuff. And that's where the community manager insight really comes in. So when you market something, when you tell someone or a group of people what is amazing about your game, a marketer will just be pushing out things. So it's basically a one-way road, whereas a community manager will push those things out and then we'll take the feedback that comes back, and then apply it to or feed that back to the marketer so they can improve, or to the developer so they can improve the game or the product.
And having that sort of loop where a community manager is able to talk to these different roles, is able to talk to the developer about what's being said, is such an important part of community management. It's something that you really need to have within your team in order to properly manage. We've had times when developers have jumped in Discord and just started saying stuff as well, and you're like, no, you can't. This is. And a lot of people think that community managers in Discord are the developers. So that also comes as a shock to like the general community. There are other people that work on this, and these are the other people. They'll just say things. It's such a different skill set.
Absolutely. And my favorite is usually like, why are you chatting on Discord? Why aren't you coding the game? Well, I'm a community manager, I'm not a coder.
Why haven't you fixed my bugs yet? It's like, I don't know how.
Exactly. But yeah, just to finish on that topic then. So, we've got the community managers, we've got the developers, we've got marketers. As time goes on, it is possible that community management as a discipline may be fragmented. As I mentioned before, you can have community manager, you can have a social media manager. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're separate. Similarly, some studios or some businesses have a player experience role. And that role is actually just there to collect feedback through surveys or player testing, and figure out what are the pain points that players have with the product. What can the developer do to make the game better? But that is a separate role to a community manager who then sits next to there and just sort of manages by waving a ban hammer in the air and making grandiose statements.
I've not personally seen many player experience roles. That's such an interesting way to get feedback and way to sort of understand more about what your player base is thinking. Is that something you've seen done like within the game itself or within the places where communities hang out, like Discord?
The example I'm particularly thinking of was one studio in particular. I wasn't able to tell, and that was because I was talking to the team there. I wasn't able to tell exactly where they were active, but for me personally, that fragmentation, I can see it makes sense. But for me personally, I think that in fragmenting those roles out to have, different disciplines, it makes it harder to actually come to very clear decisions and information, because as soon as you have multiple people, multiple stakeholders talking about something, inputting on something, it really muddies the water. Whereas if you have a single expert who can say, all right, if you do this, the community is going to react this way. This is the problem that they're currently facing. My recommendation is to do this. That's almost a very good one-stop shop for developers to then say, okay, we understand that. Whereas if it's just, if you have a player experience person and the developer interacts with those, and the community managers are just sort of managing your Steam forum or similar, you will often miss the context of the true emotion behind decisions and feelings within the community, and you can easily make missteps there if you're not fully in sync. And it's harder to be in sync when there's more people.
So trusting your community manager is a big part of that.
Yeah,
We're the
exactly.
experts. So obviously player feedback is like a really important part of keeping your community engaged and understanding what your community wants in terms of game improvements. Um,
Mm.
do you want to talk about the Mass Effect trilogy ending in that case study?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So this was a little note I made when I saw this this topic in the agenda. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Just again, mostly for the benefit of the viewers, so they don't always have to stare at my mug. So this was the when I started community management years ago now, probably 10 years. Before that, I was for 2 years in customer support. Yeah, 2012. There you see it. This was actually a pivotal moment in the history of gaming, in my opinion. So Mass Effect was a trilogy. It ended with number 3, and the ending was largely panned by everybody. 2012 was a time when there wasn't a huge amount of MTX or live service or DLC or updates that were made to the game. So it's actually quite unusual for developers to come back into games and continue to update them. It was around, but it wasn't to the extent that it is nowadays. And the Mass Effect 3 ending controversy, I like to sort of mention these kind of things because it's nice to have a story, a little case study that people can dig into. And I'd recommend anybody who's interested in this topic have a look. There's an entire wiki page, as I say. The Mass Effect ending 3, it was panned by people, by the gamers, and the developers then had this decision: okay, do we change the ending or do we stick to our artistic vision? And in the end, they did actually release a DLC that changed the ending, but that was a pivotal moment in the industry where it was a question of, can a developer just stick to their guns and say this is the game, or do they have to bow to public opinion and say, okay, we got this wrong, we're going to do what you want? And I think from this moment forward, from the Mass Effect ending controversy forward, in my opinion, you started to see a lot more communities, players demanding changes to the product that was actually delivered to them. And those changes, sometimes they're benign, sometimes they're really big, and it actually sets an expectation in community that is quite dangerous because it's difficult to figure it out. Because games, they have set budgets, they're delivered, and then they're meant to be done unless they're a live service, of course. So when you introduce, okay, once you're done, you also have to allocate resources to reacting to players' feelings about this thing or another. It actually changed the risk profile of your product, and actually makes it harder to develop games. But I like that little case study. I'm full of case studies, as it were. But I think that's probably a good segue. Like if that was 2012, where
Yeah.
are we right now? Right. So we're in a industry right now where live service is an expectation. Is it's a surprise when games come out as that are not live service. I personally, my most recent main game that I community managed was Outriders, which was published by Square Enix, developed by People Can Fly. That came out, I want to say 3 years ago now. And before that, we had said throughout, all the streams that we did, all the marketing, we said this is all in a game. This game is all in the box. There's nothing that comes after this. We're not going to update it. We're delivering you a full package. We released the game, and people said, "What's next? What's coming now?" So even despite us saying that, just the default expectation was that you have to continue updating and changing or improving or delivering new content. So that's where we are today. But thinking about player feedback and how that can drive game improvement and especially foster community engagement. If I just mentioned two, let's say, difficult aspects of player feedback and what that means, I'll balance it out with putting out two early access examples that were hugely successful. So you've got Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades. As far as if my memory serves, of course, both of them released into early access, and they were maybe had little rocky times during early access, but when they then finally launched, they were launching off the back of months or years of early access during which players had played the games or parts of the game, put in feedback, and the game had gotten better and better, to the extent that when they finally launched that product, everyone was blown away because everything had been thought of, right? It was, and I think those are some really great examples of where if you can put your product to the players early enough, rather than Mass Effect deliver it here, oh god, we have to change it. If you can say, okay, we're halfway through development, let's show bits and pieces of the game to the public, that can really positively impact your game and product, but only if you actually plan ahead and if it's right for the game. It won't work for all games, of course.
Of course. And you sort of talked about earlier how you had a game that you worked on, you heard some of the louder people, and you spent a lot of resources changing that, but it didn't quite gel with retention and with what you ended up hoping that it would gel with. There's a big impact that you can have when you have player support and player retention on the satisfaction that people have. So, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I'll come back to Outriders because that was quite a. It was yeah, so it was a difficult launch. Let's put it that way. But I would like to think that the work I did as a community manager back then, which initially was largely being very active, very loud on Twitter, giving the players the information they needed. I can quickly share my my Everest, as it were, the tweet I'm probably most proud of and will never be able to improve upon. That the servers kept falling down. So I said, you know, I put this out there and it had was really positive. Working in this way, being able to continually during that launch period put out message every 15 minutes about the state of the game, that took Outriders Twitter followers from 20,000 at launch. Within 24 hours, we were at 200,000. So I added 180,000 followers to Twitter just purely by again and again posting what is the state of the servers, what are we doing on the back end, what can players do, and it was a long weekend. It was not easy, and it then followed into other weekends, which I can chat about a bit. But that hugely increased engagement with our channels, and players stayed with the game even while they were not even able to log in.
I feel that sort of having that open communication and being able to directly talk to your players and be like, we're aware and we're doing something
exactly
means a lot to communities. Because if you just have radio silence, they'll assume you're doing nothing, don't even care. So it's definitely took advantage of that opportunity and we're able to be super clear. When it comes to, we've talked a lot about needing to get feedback from different players and understand them to sort of build up what your community wants and end up building this positive place. So this segues into how do you maintain a positive relationship while maintaining positive mental health? As you said, it was a very long weekend for you.
Yeah, it was actually a very long month. Let's put it that way, and it was Easter too. So
so a holiday. So everyone's off. No one has work.
Everyone's off, apart from the skeleton crew working on setting the game up and all that kind of stuff. So I basically missed my Easter that year, but I did it for the game, and I'm proud of the work I did. So that's all fine. I think again, staying with the Outriders example, a really important topic that I always make sure that I raise with any community managers I work with is around setting your boundaries and maintaining your positive mental health. Like, what are your tactics? What are the things you're doing in your day-to-day life that makes sure that you can actually sustain being a community manager? I think a lot of there used to be, maybe there's not anymore, but there used to be a saying that all community managers have a shelf life, which means most community managers will come into community, they'll be in the role for maybe 2, 3, 4 years, and then they either burn out or they transition into a brand role or maybe a development role or marketing. There's very few people that have managed to stick with it. I think I can count myself as part of that number, and I remember one of the turning points for me was actually working on Life is Strange. We'd just released Before the Storm, and I had been using my personal Facebook channel to chat in the community about, hey, this is what we're doing. You can expect this, basic community stuff. And then on Christmas Eve, in Germany, I'm German, so I was in Germany. I remember is the 23rd of December. I got a message saying, "Hey, from one of my friends in the community, saying, hey, another player gave me this. I just wanted to pass it on to you as the community manager." And it was then probably a good 200-page essay telling me how bad the game was and how terribly we'd messed up. And I was like, well, that's ruined my Christmas.
It's not a good Christmas gift.
That's not a good Christmas gift. No, thank you. You can have that one back. But I think that was the watershed moment for me, at which point I personally almost turned off my personal social media. So, and to this day, I'm terrible at LinkedIn. I'm terrible at Twitter. I'm terrible at Facebook. My Instagram got hacked ages ago, so I no longer use that anyway. That's a story in itself. But that separation of myself from the brand, even from social media, has actually, in my opinion, allowed me to stay in community management far longer than people who actually who are active in a community and also active on social media. I mean, as a community manager, I'll say it. Social media was a mistake. There's something inherently toxic about it. We work in this world, but I think because we work in this world, you have to be doubly aware of the risk of it, because you will be faced and you will come across all the worst things in humanity. You will come across a lot of great things as well, and there's a lot of people out there, a lot of gamers who are fantastic people. But you cannot escape that, particularly in gaming, you will encounter adversity, particularly from other people. And finding ways to deal with that is hugely important to maintain your mental health. For me, I ran away and from social media. Other people may have other ways of dealing with it, and I'm not going to say those are ever wrong. Everyone has their own way, but you have to figure it out. You can't just go into community management and say, "Oh, great, I'm gonna be representative for this game. I'm gonna talk to all the people." Oh, wait, what happens when actually it gets a bit much? What can I do? Where can I escape to? My personal channels no longer are, I can't escape to those because people come and hunt me down there as well and tell me about the problems they're having in the game.
So when you have a public social media, I do also find that people find me and are like, hey, or find my family as well through my social media platforms. They're like, hey, listen, pass a message on, which is really bizarre that there's not that sort of boundary. So it's interesting to hear that you just step back from it all.
Yeah, exactly. So, despite that's sort of the personal channels angle, putting yourself out there. The other thing I'd like to maybe touch on boundaries, mental health, and all that. Outriders launch. Let's go back there again. Let's enter that deep dark cave. So it launched. We had problems with the game, and for the first 2.5 weeks, probably, I did not have a day off. So I'd work every day. I'd work late, and I'd get up early. And then about two weekends in, again, this is only a temporary thing. If you ever find yourself doing that long term, you need to get out of there. I managed to maintain that just because I knew, okay, this is only for a short term. This cadence, this work style. But anyways, I digress. So 2 weeks, I was basically on Reddit every day, replying to people, putting up threads, figuring out things, announcing what news about the game. And then on Friday, I said, okay, I need to take a break. I'm going to step away for 2 days, just for the weekend. It's for the weekend, right? People won't expect something. So I stepped away, and on Monday morning, I came back to work, and there'd been a couple Reddit threads, again, blowing up saying the devs have abandoned us. They haven't talked to us, in 24 hours. Where are they? They're, and the community was going into a little meltdown at that point, and that actually, that made me feel like I couldn't step away. Again, at that point, I needed to set boundaries. So what I did personally to save myself, my sanity, but also manage the expectations of the community was I said, okay, you know what? I was gone. It was holiday, not holiday, it was weekend.
Yeah,
People
normal
don't
days.
people don't tend to work on a weekend. But I said, okay, we're going to have very predefined times when you will hear from us. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, I'm going to put out a post. That's when you get your news. All the other days, I might reply, I might say things, but I'm never going to announce things here or there. And actually setting a very clear expectation for a cadence, even though that cadence was hard to keep, actually helped me create the space that I needed to step away, which in turn recharged my batteries, allowed me to come back and actually do the job better than just burning a candle at both ends and ultimately ending up probably leaving a community manager role if it had gone on too long. So I think that's a really important place there.
Yeah, having that sort of predefined days sounds like a really fantastic idea. On our Discord, we have a weekend mod, a separate weekend mod. But if anyone ats me, we have an auto message that comes on that goes, Jupiter doesn't work weekends. Contact the mod that's on the weekend.
That is so clever. Well
That
done, you.
saves so much of my weekend. Don't even check it. And they understand to stop spamming me. So it's good to have those things in place to help your sort of mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
So,
I think just go on.
oh, I was going to segue into something else. So do you want to finish up?
No, I talk too much.
So, what tools and platforms and metrics might a community manager use to collect feedback and better understand what's being said?
Yeah, so this is again we're because of the time we have, we're sort of hurdling through a lot of topics, which I think is great. I'd say each of these things we could easily spend an hour or more talking about. So I'm going to try and run through quite quickly tools, platforms, metrics, particularly with a view to someone who's thinking about community management coming into the industry and just hearing things like report, sentiment, platform. What all these things? Where do I look? What do I figure out? So, you've, I work for Square Enix, so there's an expectation of data-driven decisions and really big reports, and can we measure everything? So we use a platform called Talkwalker, which is essentially a brand listening platform. It is essentially the kind of platform that you can only get to use when you work for a huge company, just because it's so expensive, unfortunately. But I think it's valuable to know because you might end up finding yourself needing to use these things. So a brand listening tool like Talkwalker will crawl the entire internet for mentions of your keyword. It will do that constantly. So when you go into this tool, as I did for, let's say, Outriders or Life is Strange, that tool can instantly tell me you've had 100,000 people talking about this, you've had 20,000 comments, and your sentiment is 34%. And that's how you create data-driven reports. What is sentiment? Sentiment is essentially, how do people feel about your product? Are they more positively or are they more negatively inclined? And sentiment is a little value that goes up and it goes down. And the more people are talking about your thing, the more accurate sentiment becomes, because it is essentially an average of things. It is essentially, it takes the negative. So if you have 10 negative people chatting and you have 20 positive people chatting, it averages that out and says, okay, you have a positive sentiment because there's more people who are talking positively. So that is, that's sentiment. And I think sentiment is actually a very key part of community management and understanding how, like I said, not the people following your social media, but all players in general feel about the product, even if they're not following you, because it crawls the entire internet. And that sentiment tells you, hey, the Outriders in relation to crossplay, people are right now very positive about that. Outriders in relation to servers, right now they're very negative about that. And that is how you can judge the health, let's say, of a community when you have access to these kind of tools. On the other hand, when you're looking at analytics for platforms directly, so your Twitter or your X, your Instagram, your Facebook, you'll usually be able to see analytics, data, stats, and you have to figure out what is the most important thing in there to actually measure how are people feeling or how are people reacting or engaging with your content. And the big word there is engagement, right? The important thing is how are people, if they see the things you're doing on social media, are they liking, commenting, or following you? All of which are great. If they're commenting, even if they're not maybe saying great things, that is an engagement. There are other metrics which I personally think are junk, but which a lot of people love to talk about. So you have impressions. Its impressions, in my opinion, are essentially a number with which people love to cook their numbers. So if they want to say they've got a huge, the thing that they did last week was hugely impactful, they will reach for the impressions number. Impressions are essentially on Twitter, if you've posted something and someone is scrolling through and your post flies through their phone or desktop news feed for 3 seconds, they haven't even seen it. That's an impression. Is that value? Not really, in my opinion. Again, that's my opinion. If other people feel differently, that's entirely, fine. Everyone will be able to, find their own truths with these things. But I think those are just a couple of things where I think those are platforms and metrics that are important to think about and to find ways to measure. So sentiment, like I say, if you have a smaller community, you can probably figure out your sentiment using just basic arithmetic. It will require a lot of counting, probably. Sometimes like maybe a Hootsuite or a Sprout Social, those kind of things might offer it. But if you go through your Discord and you almost tot up, okay, every time PlayStation 5 was mentioned, was that negative or positive? And you just make a count of that, and then you can basically say, okay, there were 30 mentions positively, 10 negatively. That can give you an indication of the balance of sentiment, which you can then give to your team of developers or marketers to make decisions based off.
I know you mentioned Talkwalker, but there are other tools that are more suitable for smaller budget studios. Impress have their source of different tools and resources for, they say, marketing, but they have a similar tool that's aimed more at indies and smaller studios that's quite a bit more affordable, that tracks the sort of mentions on websites, and it doesn't give such a detailed report, but it does point to where your audience is, where you're mostly being mentioned, and gives you clues to that, which can also be very helpful in then counting and figuring it out on your own.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's really great insight and very helpful to bridge that gap that I'm clearly leaving there. So thank you.
Fine. Just wanted to mention some other tools as well, because I know that some studios have way higher budgets, but community managers do need appropriate tools to sort of do their job better. So Impress is a good one for those who might want to ask for these tools in their job if they have a lower budget. Yes.
Yeah. I think there are other tools as well that are like Talkwalker is a global tool, so like airplanes use it and banks use it. Whereas I think there are tools that are specific to the games industry and may also be better targeted at the budgets that we're all generally more comfortable at. So that's good to know.
So within your community, there's a lot of flexibility and adapting that needs to be done, particularly in the QA process, to accommodate the different changing requirements that your game or games might have. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to explain my position at Square Enix, I'm part of Square Enix External Studios. We are part of a studio that works with external publishers. So we've worked with People Can Fly on Outriders. We've worked with Don't Nod and Deck Nine Games on Life is Strange. We've worked with Avalanche on the Just Cause series. So we work with studios that are external. And then Square Enix offers QA support as well. And we also have producers and publishers there as well. So the developers develop the game and then they give it to us for QA and publishing and producing and all that kind of stuff. So when we launch a game, we all pile into this huge Slack channel called the Mission Control, and we'll usually do that some weeks before launch. And during that time, we'll talk about, okay, what's going on, how's the game code looking, how's the build, are there things that are going to hit us on launch, what can we patch out, and then when launch arrives, the community manager, myself, then essentially just fires a barrage of issues into that mission control. And what it used to be is that our QA leads would then pick that up and they'd have their teams try and reproduce the things that the community manager was providing them with. So community manager had to give very good information to identify the problem. If the QA team can reproduce it, the developer can reproduce it, they can fix it. And that's the cycle essentially. So I worked very closely with the QA team and the producers in that fashion in the past. And then with Outriders, again, I feel like a broken record, keep coming back to it, but it's the most relevant, biggest one in recent times for me. We launched and there were several patches that we released in the months that followed. And there came a point, so I'd always have to talk to QA, okay, what are we fixing in the next patch? Okay, I write the patch notes, huge patch notes, and then we'd post them, and things would break, so we start the cycle again. But there was actually an instance where we patched the game, we released an update, and it broke something, as in, well, it always breaks something, but it actually created a crash that occurred sometimes on launch. Now, we said, oh God, okay, what can we do? All right, let's release another patch as soon as we can. The patch cycle, by the way, is essentially we report a problem, the developer fixes it. Let's say that takes 24 hours. Then our QA team has to test it. Let's give that another 48 hours. So you're 3 days now. Oh, and in between there, the developer has to cook the build, which is essentially they export the game. And that can take an entire day just to sort of have this program running and exporting the game. So between even finding the problem to fix and releasing the patch, you could be looking at a good week. And then, of course, you don't want to release it on a weekend. So you release it next week. So you have to be quite flexible, but also there are like time boxes that you have to keep to, which are quite difficult. With coming back to this crash that was introduced with one of the patches, we said, okay, we're going to try and fix this with the next week patch. So I did community manager stuff. I went out and said, okay, we're really sorry about this problem. We're going to fix this in a patch that's coming next week. The next week rolled around and we had not identified the problem. So we could not release a patch. And we were not sure if the patch that we had was going to fix or make it worse. So we actually had to tell the community, actually, you know what? We're not going to be able to release it. We push it back. And this went on for a month.
Wow.
And during this time, I had to basically keep working with QA in a very flexible way. Like, okay, how can we figure this out? How can we discuss this topic with the community? And at some point, you're also questioning, what do I say to community? I can't tell them it's coming next week because it might not. But at the same time, if I don't tell them anything, they're going to be frustrated. And I think there's a big topic around how much information can you share, should you share with your community? Because in game development, I'm sure you know this as well, Jupiter, things are constantly changing. Your plans are constantly just falling apart, right? And if you make those plans public, it makes it public to everybody that your plan is falling apart. Not because you're doing things wrong, it's just the nature of game development, right?
And it changes the sort of expectation of the community as well when you can't meet what you've said is going to happen, and they get quite disappointed. And there's a whole thing there as well. Have we lost Toby? Oh no, I think we have lost Toby. At least it looks like that on my screen. Unless I'm the one that's got lost. We lost Toby. Oh no, I'm still here though. I will give you an update as soon as I have one. Hopefully Toby is able to come back. I'm going to just pause this, well, not pause the stream, loop some music for a minute while we sort this out. We've patched Toby. He is back.
We've patched me back in. How terribly embarrassing. My internet just fell over.
I assumed it was because I interrupted you and you just stayed perfectly still waiting.
No, not at all. That was entirely my fault. So I do deeply apologize for that interruption.
Perfectly fine. We were just talking about we were just talking about patching things, funnily enough, and about the sort of communication that you put early on. And I was saying that with our community, when you put out information in like a deadline, like this week on Wednesday, there'll be an update of this, and next week there'll be an update of that. When you don't make it, it ends up being a whole thing with the community's faith in you and with how they speak to you and how they forgive you. So knowing what's on schedule and what's not is super important.
Absolutely. And I actually put the question to the community after this happened like twice. I said, okay, do you want to have information that could be incorrect by the next week, or do you want to have crystal clear 100% accurate information, but you might have to wait for it a few weeks? And generally people said, oh, thank you for asking me, I appreciate it, really good engagement. They wanted to know more information sooner, so they wanted to be kept up to date. That worked for my community, and that's then how we ran it. But it's not a hugely great look when you sort of have to do this publicly constantly. But perhaps it helps with community management.
And speaking about stuff taking a little bit too much time than they might have initially thought, how do you manage scope creep and minimize the impact of these changes on testing efforts? Oh no, Toby is gone again. I'm going to give him a second to see if he reappears or just buffers out. But it looks like we might need to patch him back in. He needs time to think. Okay, one moment. We're back.
Right. Apologies. I'm now on
Thanks.
my phone's 3G, 4G internet, which will hopefully be more stable. Welcome to.
Hopefully.
We're living.
Yes. Welcome back. I was asking if you had strategies for managing scope creep and minimizing the impact of changes. As we were talking about, having that sort of update cycle and informing the community is really important.
Yes. With game dev, there will always be budgets, and there will always be a producer saying you can't have this thing. But as a community manager, you have to figure out what are the things that are non-negotiable for the community, because the producer will be just trying to close and finish the game, or wrap up the development of it, because it's hugely expensive to develop games. Whereas the community manager needs to know, okay, I know you want to finish this, but if we have an opportunity, if you are still developing, if you're patching, if we can do something in future, these are the things that we need to really that are non-negotiable, right? We need to implement this particular feature because it's creating a bad experience for the players. It's dragging our game down. At the same time, you as a community manager need to know what are the issues that people are talking about, but are either going to be too expensive to implement, or are actually just that minority that really wants this feature that is going to be great for speedrunners, but 95% of your community is never even going to touch it, and it's going to cost you £10,000 to implement. So knowing, sort of being able to figure that out, and as a community manager, taking all the requests from players, the feedback, you have to be able to pass that information and say, okay, this stuff, I can pass it all to the producer, to the production team, to the developers, and maybe some of it will be put in. A lot of it will be rejected just based on time and resources. But what are the things that I know have to be done? And what are the things where I will actually say, the community wants this, but I know that you guys are too busy because you're doing this other thing, so I'm not going to fight you for this. And I think when I've talked to producers in the past, they've had bad experiences with community managers because the community managers fought them too hard on things. The community managers demanded things, they wanted features implemented that the community wanted, and some of those things will absolutely have been important. The question is, were they so important that it leads to a bad relationship at work, or money lost? Because in a way, you have to, as bad as it sounds, you have to think about it transactionally. If we implement this feature in the game, which will cost money, is that going to result in a growth in players, and will make it financially viable to actually do this thing? And because as long as something's financially viable, we can continue developing games. Once you're starting to run at a loss, you can no longer develop a game. So you
That's not
you
good
kind
for
of have to
anyone.
find that balance. Yeah. So you have to find that balance of figuring out the things where the scope creep, you're saying, yeah, this is something we need, versus that is, yeah, I can request it, but I know it's going to be rejected, or I'm going to reject it myself because I know it's just impossible.
It's really important to make sure that you're as a community manager, you're prioritizing based on your knowledge of the community and also the product team, because you are that bridge between what people want and the product team. But there's a lot of stuff that product teams just can't do in the amount of time or can't give resources to. You're so right about that.
That's right.
When it comes to being an expert, as a community manager. You normally have to build a big knowledge base or a way to effectively and consistently address community inquiries. And having these can really help with your time and your communication with the community. Do you want to talk more about mission control and the way that your information was spread to your greater community?
Yeah, absolutely. So mission control was brilliant as a tool, because I mentioned it's myself, it's the QA team, it's the production team, it's also a lot of marketing people, it's our customer service team, it's probably a good 150 people, it's our server infrastructure team, it's an IT team. All of them are in this mission control. Now, the person who uses it most, myself, the community manager, is probably the person who's most on top of it. So you can't expect everybody in the business to constantly watch every single thread pop up and about every issue and what is actually important to them, what isn't. So you have to, as a community manager, you have to be that single source of knowledge, that knowledge base, that FAQ, if someone's got a question internally, that you can answer it. And then on top of that, you have to figure out ways to internally communicate, okay, what are the big announcements that we have? So for me, I set up this mission control. We had the mission control. I set up a duplicate channel that was just purely announcements. It's almost like standard Discord stuff here. But that was essentially to say, okay, we found a fix for this problem or this thing, or we're pushing this patch live, or we're taking the game offline. And you put that into your announcements, and that people absorb that much more easier. When it comes to outward facing knowledge base and FAQ, what you really, as a community manager, usually have to do is you need to work with your website team and your customer support team very closely, because if they have the same information as you do, they can find ways to put that publicly as well. The worst thing that can, not the worst thing, but a bad thing that can happen is if your customer support team is saying things differently to what you've just said on social media or in community management channels. Or even worse, when you say, go talk to customer service, and they say, oh, go report it on Reddit, and people get stuck in a loop. Like, it's a very bad customer experience for them. So that's something to avoid. And you can avoid that if you just talk to your customer service team.
A lot of community management is working closely with the different teams within your studio and within your company.
That's exactly it. And I've got one last tab I can share with regards to this. So now we worked with customer service, of course. We worked with our website team to figure out FAQs and do these things. What I did over many months of got better at this is I created Reddit mega threads, and this is great because everybody has access to these things. But essentially, these were threads that I created on Reddit that have all the information. And I think an important part here is that community management, you can expect players to perhaps come to you on traditional platforms, but it is so much more important that you go to where the player is. So you will go into the Reddit, you will go into the subreddit, you will go into Discord, and you will act as a guest there because they are fundamentally community platforms. But as part of being a guest, you can actually be there to provide a lot of information. So this, for example, was when we released an expansion. I wrote too many words, but then I linked to all the information that players might have. So if they wanted to know about the new gear that's coming in the expansion, they could check that out. And I had a bunch of these kind of threads where actually, let me see if I can find the particular thread I'm thinking of. Had a lot of threads where it was, okay, we've just released the game. Here's all the technical information that you need to know. So I've just found it. So I'm just going to quickly reshare my screen. So this is my answer to that FAQ, that knowledge base of you were mentioning. So this was, again, a mega thread, the Outrise launch information, known issues, tracking. So tracking of the issues essentially, which allows players to also know what is is there an issue that I need to report, or are they aware of it? So, for example, I then subdivided this into known issues and workarounds, all with their own. If I click into this, I don't know if it's going to show there, but if they, I don't think it streams it. The StreamYard will jump to there. So that this, for example, gather subred, I'd create
Mm,
subthreads for each issue where I could then also talk to people about that kind of thing. And this actually created a very exactly that self-service environment, like you were saying, where people can then say, okay, yeah, I've got this problem, let's talk about it. And I can also post workarounds
mm,
to that kind of stuff. Um, Inventories and accolade white, all that kind of stuff. And you can have people engaging with you really well there, or just even just looking for a workaround. So Steam Reddit threads and sub-threading was very useful for me, and I think it also grew the subreddit quite nicely. So that was great. I think the other thing that I probably would mention is Steam. As a developer, it's really useful for you to monitor Steam. You should,
mm,
like if you don't monitor Steam, either Valve will take care of it for you, in which case it will be quite anonymous, or if there's something in your game that the gaming industry disagrees with, because game is TM, the Steam is where they will go and you will find just toxic threads everywhere.
mm,
So you as a community manager you'll want to bring those threads together and create the information hubs there. So with Steam, I'll quickly share my screen again as I've just got that up. And sorry that we've gone over time. That was entirely my fault. I'm happy to stick around and answer any
we also
questions.
started a few minutes late, so it's all good.
Cool. So this was Outriders on Steam.
Mm,
You've got your a welcome that usually someone in the community will create a great welcome threads with links, sometimes FAQs. And then I, as a community manager, I said, "Oh, lovely! I'll sticky this for you," and I did. But what I've also created there is a technical support, um, which again is with Steam. You can pin things, you can create FAQs, you can create feedback and bug reporting. So you can use particularly forums for like this to gather information, but then also post the workarounds. And especially as a community manager, Steam has that great feature where you can list your post as the answer to something.
mm,
So if somebody says, "Hey, my sound is cutting out," and you respond, turn off VSync, and that's the fix. That will then be very public, and you can pin that, and that again becomes very useful for players to see and
mm.
engage with, and even notice that someone is there, someone's caring, and someone's able to help them enjoy the game.
I think your quote about going to where your community is and finding them is a really powerful way to manage community. A lot of people build a Twitter or a Discord and expect everyone to come to them, but your
That's right.
community will manifest in other places. So it's really good to follow them and
Mm.
be active where they are.
Yeah,
Yes, this is.
exactly. And I think a lot of people forget even PlayStation and Xbox have inbuilt community
Mm,
functionality that you can use to actually send a message to everybody who plays the game. And most people don't even realize it. Um, so, that's exactly what you're saying. Go to where the players are. Don't expect them to come where you
mm. This has been an extremely informative and knowledgeable
are.
talk that went way deep into all aspects of community management and how they work with other people within the team. So this was really, really interesting. As a community manager myself, my community management is on a different scale than yours. So it was really nice to hear about how you work with your much larger team and how you manage that as well.
No,
Um,
absolutely. It's good, and like I said, I'm happy to even take questions from the chat. I'm glad that some of the quotes I mentioned, like you aren't just talking to the one player, you're talking to the 10,000 watching your post. I'm glad that resonated with I think a couple of you.
mm,
But yeah, if anyone's got questions, I'm happy to take them if you want to post them into chat. But yeah, I'd be keen actually to hear from yourself, Jupiter. What what resonated the most with you, what was most helpful, and what do you think actually was very different in your experience to what I was
That was
spouting about?
3 different questions all at once. I think the mental health resonated with me a lot. When I first joined community management, I was new to it, and I was available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you need me, I'm here. Discord notifications on. And I very quickly found that I was exhausted all of the time and then making mistakes and then not prioritizing myself. And that's something I've always struggled with because community management does feel like a weekend job forever. It does feel like something you have to do at Christmas. And everyone's off on weekends and Christmas. So that's the best time to be active. So I found that that really resonated with me, and making that balance is something that really helped me stick around in community management. You work with a much bigger team, so I found a lot of that interesting because we have such a small team over at Toya. And though it's such a great team, we all interact really well together. I'm one of those community managers that do social media management and also influencer management. It'd be
Oh.
fantastic to have more people take on. We do bug reports almost directly. And so it's great to hear there are other bits that other people can take on. I strive to one day be a community manager with a bigger company that has more roles. I think it sounds like a really interesting way to sort of work your job. Yeah, and I found a lot of your advice on finding your communities to be super relevant, especially when it comes to smaller community management roles, because a lot of entry level community managers will be like, people go create the community, and then that's what you're hired to do, and that's so challenging. Just
Wave your
creating a
community
community.
stick. Make people follow us.
We do have people that play our game,
Uh,
ergo figure it out. It's like, oh yeah, how do we even do that? So the idea to go and find the community and populate those spaces is so powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, the influencers that you manage as well. I had a note in here as well to chat about that. I've talked way too much, so I won't go into it. But influencers, they need to have someone dedicated to them, and also that you need to handle them almost like press, because I've made mistakes with influencers in the past. I've said stupid things, and then before I know it, in 24 hours, there's a video saying, oh, the community manager messaged this, and
Screenshot.
yeah, screenshot, and what a terrible person he is because X, Y, Z. Because the influencers, you think, that's an individual, you're getting along with them, but their business model, let's put it that way, is fundamentally based on clicks, views, getting people to just watch their stuff. They're not inherently interested in the health of your game.
Yes.
Right. As much as you'd like to think they are, their primary interest is their channel. And if their channel is driven, it gets great traffic by telling people how what a disaster your game is, that's what they're going to focus on. And I've made that mistake. I made a lot of mistakes, but that was one of the ones I most regret, where I thought I could be open to an influencer, and it turned out not to be.
Influencers do work differently than press generally. So there is like a divide between them, but they are a new form way of press, but they don't work to the same guidelines that press have. A lot of the way that they write and the way that they work that's different to that. We do have a question from JTTG. So what are some
I
key...
love this feature. Oh my God, look at that. It's just popped up. This magic.
Yeah, I did that. It's something I did. What are some key examples where silence was the right answer? We talk a lot about what we should say, but what about what we shouldn't say?
Very good point. That is actually a topic I kind of touched on in the aftermath of Outriders, when the dust was starting to settle, and I was sort of reflecting all the things I'd done at launch, growing Twitter and doing all these Reddit mega threads. I actually asked myself, did I actually help the community, and did I help the product? Or in actually talking about all these problems, oh my God, we're so open, we're so transparent, did I actually sell a vision that this is a broken game? So your communication's great, but your game's broken. Whereas if I wonder personally, if I had actually said, if I turtle up right now and actually communicate less, will it seem like the game is less broken? And that's a philosophical question I don't have an answer to.
They might also think that you're unaware of how broken it is, which would look negatively on you as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
And
Mm,
I've seen it a few times. You know, a lot of people, will reference, oh, Anthem, the community managers were super active, it launched, and then we never heard from them again. The community managers were probably told to be silent at that point because BioWare was trying to get a handle on things, and then it's really difficult. Okay, when do you reintroduce community management and things like that? So that
mm,
silence, that question of when do you not say anything at all, you need to figure out. You need to. It is a key skill of a community manager to engage your community, but with just enough information to keep them interested, but maybe not so much that you actually just collapse the house of cards upon
mm,
which the game is built. I think a really other interesting point is you the a social channel of a game will move in cycles. Let's put it that way, as does game development. So the game is announced, huge spike on your social channels. You get a lot of people following, chatting about it. You have your marketing campaign, however long that is. People will engage. There won't be as much activity as an announce, but that will they'll be there. People, you'll accumulate followers. At launch, you then have a huge amount of people coming to your game because they want to hear, oh, what's going on, what's new, I've got a problem, how do I fix it? And then after launch, we enter what is called a sustain period, where you as a community
mm,
manager, your job is just to keep those people from leaving your social channels again. And what's interesting, I've observed it with a couple channels that we have at our business. After a while, if you watch the follower count on your, let's say, your 200,000 Twitter follower handle, whenever you post, are you gaining followers or are you losing them?
mm,
And there is a tipping point at which point, if you're posting, just content which isn't even very interesting or very engaging, or the community has just moved on from your game, every time you post, you will lose a bunch of followers. So the question you need to ask yourself is, if I come back in future to this game with the sequel or with something
mm.
important, is it more valuable for me to have continually posted and actually lost people, but I've maybe gained some more engaged people? Or is it more valuable to have kept that big fat number I had initially, but they might not be hugely engaged?
They might have forgotten a little bit about you until you appear with your second game. You're
Yeah,
not posting.
exactly.
Mm. It's
So I
very
don't know if that
interesting.
answered the question, JTTG. I hope it did.
We've got one more question. I feel like read the room. You have to sort of read your, and it's something you'll get with experience on when you
Mm,
shouldn't post and when you should. You shouldn't post if you're really frustrated either. That's like a side. If you're
mm,
really frustrated with your job and with your product team, and they've messed up something, and you're talking to your Discord, and you're engaging with them. Nope. Take a break, step back. Don't engage publicly when you're not in a good frame of mind. Is what I've learned. We've got another
Oh,
question, which is
sorry. I'm really sorry, but I've just thought of another note on this question because so when I started in community management, I was in customer service, and then I mentored under the community lead at Squares at the time, and then eventually I transitioned into community management. I distinctly remember one of the first things he told me, like he gave me a case study. I think it was about the Sims 4 launch or something like that. They had huge multiplayer server problems getting people online, and we talked about silence. How do you react to chaos and catastrophe? Let's put it that way. And the thing he drilled into me and the way I've operated is, if there is an issue, as a community manager, you should acknowledge it. That doesn't
mm,
mean you have to wave a flag above the parapet and say, everybody, look, there's an issue here. But if you can say, thank you for the report, I'm going to pass it on, that goes such a long
mm,
way. You don't have to say, I know what this is, I have a fix. But if you can say, this is going to be looked at by someone, and if even better, if, like I said, in mission control, if our QA team can figure the fix out and I can pass that back outwards, there's a fantastic loop there. But if you don't have the answer, if you're not able to provide the answer, you can say, thank you very much. I might not be able to get back to you, but we're aware of this problem.
mm.
And that Twitter growth and outright those 200,000 followers, we grew those because I was constantly saying, we're aware of the problem. So I think with silence, showing awareness is hugely important, even if you can't actually provide a good answer.
Very much so. I'll do one more question,
Sorry, I talked too
then
much.
we'll wrap up. What's your advice to beginners who would love to dive into community management roles as well? What key things should they look out for as a community manager?
Yeah, very, very good question. It's going to sound weird, but the key question I ask people I interview for roles, the key skill I look out for, is actually project management, as weird as that sounds.
Okay.
Everything you do in community management is or could be considered a little project. And I define a project as a risk or an opportunity that you identify, you come up with a plan to address it, you execute that plan, and then you look back on the result and can say, okay, that was a success or not. That, in big and small shapes, is what you're doing as a community manager every single day. You may see something on Reddit, you may see a problem in the game, you may see something on Steam, you may see something falling apart, you may see a content creator who's created an amazing video. And all those things are essentially just little bubbles of where you have to identify something, you have to figure out a way to react to it. You, as a community manager, have to execute that reaction. It could be creating content, it could be coming up with a copy, the words to reply, it could be putting the people together. And then afterwards, you have to see, okay, was that good? Did I solve that correctly? And that is essentially day and day and day, every single day. Like creating an event, a community live stream is a project, because you figure out, you see the opportunity. If we engage with the community on live stream, we can create engagement, we can create positive sentiment. How do I make that happen? And then it's up to you, because community managers especially are very often jack of all trades. They have to figure out all the things by themselves. You know, I can see you're grinning because it's true for you as well, I'm sure. You have, it's very often as a community manager that you have to figure things out by yourself, and you have to be a self-starter, and all of that is really succinctly held in the project management skill.
It's a very interesting way to look at it as product management. So it makes sense when you said it, but not something I had ever fully thought about. But yes, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this information and advice. If anyone watching wants more information on community management and their role, again, check out the entry-level skill hub. There's plenty of information there that's worth thumbing through and can help you further. But that's it from us, I believe. And now I just say goodbye a lot until Jonas takes us off.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Jupiter, for being a fantastic host. I deeply apologize for my shonky internet. I'm still on a phone 4G, by the way.
It's pretty good 4G.
That's worked out well. That's 4G, right? It's not bad. And thank you also to everyone who came along and attended and chatted and asked questions as well. That makes it awesome.
Yes. Goodbye.